We're in trouble in America. We're losing our moral bearings. We're losing our respect for the rule of law. And you look around America today and things are bad and they're getting worse. We're broke. We're dispirited. We're scared. We've been moving closer and closer to socialism, further away from God, the Constitution, doing what's right in our own eyes, and all the while, not noticing that it's killing us. It's killing our nation.
Just beginning.
Americans tend to be too comfortable, slowly but surely turning their backs on the sacrifices their forefathers made for liberty. Why is that? As bad as it is, as horrible as it seems, as unlikely as it appears that we can escape, what we're going through can actually be a vitally necessary experience for us, and one that is ultimately very healthy and liberating for this country. The truth needs to be told in all the dark places, because it's the truth that sets us free.
WorldNetDaily is live. It is December 18, 2024, Wednesday. We have a fantastic guest on today because to talk about the coming PSYWAR, Dr. Robert W. Malone will be joining us here in just a moment. We have a lot of powerful narratives to explore today, and there's going to be no room for any slow moving brains out there. You got to get your coffee going, get your Red Bulls up, and we're gonna get this going here. We have a fantastic conversation awaiting you. Dr. Robert Malone is the author of a new book called PSYWAR. Do we have a cover? The cover of this? We want to make sure you guys have this. He co-wrote this with his wife, with a foreword by General Michael Flynn. So we'll get into this. Josh Turnbow, of course, is here as well. And Dr. Robert Malone, welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for having me on, and it's great to see you again.
Excellent. First, folks, we want to just let you know that Patriot Mobile, if you go over to patriotmobile.com/WNDPatriot, you can sign up there because Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. I didn't even know that was a category, but Patriot Mobile invented it, and they are hitting that space hard. And what's great about this is that your dollars, when you pay Patriot Mobile for their service, part of their dollars goes towards causes and charities that you care about as a conservative audience. And so we're proud to partner with them. So scan the QR code, hit the link in the description, and head over to patriotmobile.com/WNDPatriot. All right, let's get right to this. Welcome, Dr. Malone. So your new book here, PSYWAR, I have not yet read it. It just came out within the last few months here. I've read your previous book, however, but walk us a little bit here into what kind of prompted you to expand upon this topic here.
So, yes, this is absolutely outside of the swim lane that I was trained to fill, having to do with medicine and molecular virology and research and all that good stuff. The way this came about was when I started speaking out and going on these various podcasts in the latter part of 2021, mostly. I got, particularly after the Rogan podcast, I really got hit with all of the tools and tricks that are out there that we've become so familiar with. Nowhere near as bad as what Donald Trump got hit with, but very similar to what they're deploying on Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard and many others. And this involves the coordinated defamation attacks from corporate media, the various online hazing and crowd stalking, gang stalking that was common for any physician that was speaking out against the approved narrative, the editing of my Wikipedia page to highlight that I was a spreader of misinformation because I was saying things that were not aligned with the approved narrative of that particular time, et cetera, et cetera. And as this was coming at me, I was trying to make sense of it, having been through multiple outbreaks and being kind of an outbreak and pandemic specialist in the biodefense field. I never experienced anything like this. I'd never seen anything like this before. Never seen anything like the coordinated propaganda that I was observing. Or perhaps I just wasn't fully aware of it until the cannons got turned on me. But in any case, Jill and I started taking the time to dive into trying to understand the nature of propaganda and the nature of a lot of these different forces and the kind of history of gang stalking, crowd stalking, the use of these terms like controlled opposition, the term conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist, something that was really first introduced into American language by the CIA right after the Kennedy assassination, the first Kennedy assassination. The term controlled opposition being one that was actively weaponized and developed by the FBI during the 60s, particularly against the Indian protest movements, as a way to spread paranoia and fear and dissent within protest groups and communities, et cetera, et cetera. And as we began diving into these topics and understanding more about Operation Mockingbird, for instance, the CIA program to influence corporate media, we ventured into an area that I had never even heard of before, fifth generation warfare, and the literature mostly coming from War College people and State Department type folks that had developed the theory and language of fifth generation warfare. And I in a very large audience in Stockholm, I spoke for the first time about psychological warfare and fifth generation warfare, and it just blew the audience away. They'd never heard anything about this. And I had a fair amount of granularity at that point for the talk. It went on for about half an hour, and they were just gobsmacked afterwards. And I realized that just like when I had stumbled onto Matthias Desmet and his theories about the psychological basis of totalitarianism that people are aware of as the phenomena of this
mass formation.
Exactly, or mass formation psychosis. Thank you for mocking me. So as I started speaking about fifth gen warfare, I realized that this was something also that was touching deep in the common psyche, and another one of those cases where suddenly things made a lot more sense once you understood the theory and structure of this modern type of psychological warfare and propaganda campaigns. And we wrote about it extensively in our Substack, and not exclusively, but it was about a quarter to a third of the essays we'd put out. We put out about 12 to 1,300 now. And after we finished the promo for the prior book that you referred to, The Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming, then it was a question of what do we turn to? What's going to come next? Are we going to talk about homesteading? Are we going to talk about marriage? Or what? And so we decided together, Jill and I, that we would try to collate our essays on psychological warfare and fifth gen warfare. So she began building the table of contents and structuring these. Our publisher from previous, Tony Lyons at Skyhorse, was very enthusiastic about the project. And that's how it rolled out. The intention of the book is certainly it's cathartic for us to write it, but the purpose and the reason why a reader should dive into this is to really arm themselves with information so that they can understand what's being done, how it's being done, who's doing it, and what they're aligned with, the political objectives that they're aligned with, which the subtitle for the book is Defending the New World Order, or Enforcing the New World Order. So that's the kind of the genesis and the thrust. And then the closing of the book, closing chapters, pretty much focus on things that people can do to protect themselves and to, let's say, tunnel through into the future. Very much a prepper kind of way of looking at the world, but I think we're all.
Dr. Malone, real quick, can you, for the audience, just to arm ourselves here, you've talked a lot about before about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Can you quickly just like outline each one of those things and what the tactic is behind each one of those things? Just if you can briefly.
Yeah, sure. And aligned with that, the person that introduced this lexicon into world understanding is one of the proponents of a new psychological diagnosis that's kind of being developed, which is information disorder. So they appear to be trying to move towards defining people who are spreading misinformation, not only as domestic terrorists, which is what Mayorkas has done, but also to set it up so that people that are participating in this kind of dialogue online are able to be diagnosed with a psychological condition called information disorder. So, and we wrote about that about a week ago or 4 days ago or something like that, and provided the documentation about what's going on. So, mis, dis, and malinformation. There are a variety of different definitions out there, but essentially in the context of COVID and public health. Misinformation is any information which is being spread which differs from the approved narrative coming either from your national public health authority or from the World Health Organization. So if I'm saying something that the World Health Organization or the CDC is not currently saying, if I'm contradicting their current approved narrative, regardless of whether 6 months down the road they come around to my point of view, or the select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic in the House publishes things that are validating for everything that I've said, that's irrelevant, because at that point in time, even though perhaps I was able to perceive information and accurately interpret it quicker than the CDC was or the WHO, I'm still guilty of spreading misinformation. And if you doubt that, all you have to do is look up on my Wikipedia page, and they will tell you that I am a spreader of misinformation. So misinformation differs from the approved narrative, but it's not being done for political purposes. One is not spreading a different narrative because you're trying to advance a political agenda. If you are trying to advance a political agenda, let's say I want Bobby Kennedy elected president. I didn't endorse Bobby Kennedy. I'm just using that as a hypothetical. And so I would be saying things about vaccines or COVID or whatever that are aligned with Bobby because I wish to promote him as a candidate. Well, that would be disinformation. If you're spreading misinformation for some political agenda or other, corporate agenda. So disinformation kind of is an adjacency to gray propaganda that's used by many corporate media as well as large companies in the advertising business. So disinformation is for political purposes. Malinformation I find the most intriguing. Malinformation is any information which can cause you, to the recipient, to become distrustful of the government, whether or not it's true. So if you're spreading true information that somebody listens to, and I suspect y'all there are guilty abundantly of spreading malinformation, which makes you a domestic terrorist. So we can all have a domestic terrorism party together. But those are the three terms that have been weaponized. Now, there was a recent op-ed out in Real Clear Politics, I think it was, that is advocating that we just drop the term misinformation. It's been so heavily weaponized and propagandized and misused that it's come to be Irrelevant. It's delegitimized. Let's say that. That those who are using this weaponized term misinformation are increasingly just seen as non-credible spreaders of propaganda, because that's been
Thank goodness.
those that use that.
Yeah. Dr. Malone, I wanted to ask you, you were so important when in the past, we needed to know information about really advanced technologies no one had ever heard of. You on Joe Rogan's podcast in particular, you explained the mRNA process as you were a part of that early development. And that was amazing. But now you are talking about technologies that most people have never heard as well in the PSYWAR topic of your new book. But you talk about how like people like Edward Bernays came up with these ideas that were largely based on psychological science. I feel like most people have never heard of this. We kind of generally know that propaganda is pushed on us from time to time, but can you kind of explain these actual scientific mechanisms that kind of change the way we think and are being used against us?
Well, thanks, Josh. That's a big topic. And I think the easiest point of entry to start to wrap your head around what's going on, that I like to start with, is called nudge technology. Nudge kind of emerged in the UK, particularly UK academe, and it became widely used or deployed by the BBC and the British government as a way to and then spread throughout Europe as a way for governments to influence human behavior. And the example I like to cite, because it's kind of funny and everybody gets it, but this is a real story. Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam had a problem with male urinals in the restrooms, male restrooms, and that had to do with travelers passing through being very indiscreet in terms of their aim. The consequence was that they had a problem. The airport had a problem, a really high expense, unusual expense in maintaining the cleanliness of the men's rooms. And so the solution that was come up with, aligned with nudge technology, is they made little stickers of a fly. And they put that little sticker in the urinal where they wanted men to target, and by God, it worked. Suddenly their cleanup costs plummeted, and all of this ancillary spray became much, much less of a problem. So with that concept, and
simple
of course,
creatures,
yeah, very simple things that exploit fundamentals of how humans behave, right, and how they think. Then it's a kind of a sliding scale. Then the next step, like everything, it's a slippery slope with nudge tech. And by the way, Obama created the nudge technology unit that exists within the U.S. government, just to put a pin on that one. Then particularly in the UK, you can see, but also in the United States, with the labeling on tobacco products. So in the UK, they've really gotten pretty in your face. If you're buying tobacco products, there's a good chance you're going to see a picture of somebody's face that's been eaten out by a carcinoma, or a lung that has metastatic cancer and is profoundly diseased, as part of the required marketing packaging. So it's not just the messaging that we see on our cigarettes. The Surgeon General says, don't do this, but it's a lot heavier, images and those kinds of things. And generally the population all agrees, well, yeah, smoking's a bad thing, and it's okay that we do that. We manipulate people through this imagery. Then the next level on the ratchet is, I like to say, it depends on what generation you're in. Doctor Who is a great example from the BBC. The Doctor Who characters are reborn periodically, which enables them to move from actor to actor to actor and keep the series alive forever. But over time, more recently, the BBC has insisted that they insert in characters which represent non-traditional ethnic groups, underrepresented ethnic groups, women, et cetera, as the doctor, so that you're being exposed to this. And we can see it here in the States in Netflix. Netflix, it's a little better than it was, but there was a period of time when you couldn't see a Netflix show without encountering main characters that were, let's say, from a variety of alternative lifestyles and sexual persuasions, and in a way that was grossly overrepresented relative to the population. And not to mention, I'm not casting any aspersions, but mixed race couples is another example where we were constantly seeing mixed race couples. They were almost required for any Netflix production, and except, I guess, Yellowstone, and even Yellowstone has them, but it's Paramount. But you get the point.
Right.
Because we wanted to, the whoever they are, wanted to promote that mixed race couples were socially acceptable. So that's nudge tech. And it got so bad that a lot of people wouldn't even watch, the boycotts on Disney and Netflix, et cetera, are growingly widespread. So that's nudge. But there's a whole lot of other tech like neurolinguistic programming. Neurolinguistic programming is the use of keywords and language that you can think of it as kind of like subliminal messaging. Keywords that will trigger you to think in certain ways. There's a great little video that shows somebody, he calls it, he's doing magic. He confronts somebody on the street and frames up the issue, embeds some keywords in his comments that are related to others, and then asks the listener some questions on camera, and basically is able to direct the listener to give very specific responses about an actor's name or whatever, based on the subliminal messaging or neurolinguistic programming that he's put into his initial commentary. And we've all experienced a very crude version of neurolinguistic programming with the narrative repeated again and again and again ad nauseum, safe and effective. Safe and effective for the vaccines that didn't have any characterization. What is safe? What is effective? It just repeated again and again and again, safe and effective, safe and effective. And that goes straight into your subconscious. And you kind of assimilate that as a core belief system. So that's that. And you'll recall also during COVID, the messaging, none of us are safe until all of us have been vaccinated. And then there was all the messaging around, you have to get your vaccine to protect grandmother, or fill in the blank susceptible community or person. So that was actually field tested. There was a very large number of trials and NIH-funded studies with academics to overcome vaccine hesitancy. Matter of fact, most of the major universities received very large blocks of money from NIH to study overcoming vaccine hesitancy in students. And the way that got deployed was with the vaccine mandates. The universities were basically financially incentivized to require students to take the vaccines. That's something that hasn't really come into the public consciousness. But there was, for instance, there's a notorious Yale University study. It's a multi-armed randomized clinical trial testing different messages about that for their utility in getting the subject that is receiving the messages to either become much more willing to accept a vaccine product, and more importantly, to convince others, in other words, to proselytize that they should accept vaccine products, and particularly this COVID product. And that the peer-reviewed study that was published that laid out which of these messages was most effective, those messages were the ones that were propagated through, for instance, this $1 billion contract that HHS issued to a Beltway bandit that was then managed by the CDC and put out all kinds of what's now demonstrated to be false messages. But they were pressure tested and demonstrated to be effective for the one endpoint that they cared about, which was getting people to take the jab, whether or not it was good for them. Just, how can we manipulate people psychologically to accept these products? So there's kind of a brief spectrum. And of course, I don't think there's a major nation state in the world now that doesn't have a troll or bot farm. Notoriously, the Foundation for CDC, which is their kind of backdoor nonprofit slush fund that pharma can donate to and Bill Gates donates to. The Foundation for CDC, under CDC direction, capitalized a group called the Public Good Projects. They always have these great names. Who's against the public good?
Right.
And the Public Good Project then capitalized the organization called Shots Heard Around the World, which is still in operation. You can look it up. And Shots Heard Around the World compiled a list of social media, people active on social media with MDs, PhDs, medical care providers, et cetera, that were supportive of the CDC narrative and the CDC perspective on public health, and were willing to attack anybody who contradicted it. And then what they would do with this gang stalking operation, which is, by the way, illegal under federal law and multiple state laws, was they would send out email blasts to these people who were on basically their mailing list, telling them that, just as an example, Mary Talley Bowden at Methodist in Houston is saying things that are not acceptable about use of ivermectin or testing or disagreeing with vaccine mandates, et cetera. And then all these people from all over the world would gang up on the person identified for having had some social media transgression. And they would not only harass them on social media, so this is the trollery, et cetera, but they would also cooperatively do things like write to the medical board associated with that person and demand that they have their license taken, or write to their specialty boards and demand that they have their specialty board revoked, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another layer in this. And then if you'll allow me to continue riffing, I know
Yes,
we need
please.
This creates an environment where the intention is with fifth gen warfare and PSYWAR, the intention is to completely control all information that you gain access to through any media source, and to actively target and manipulate your mind in this modern battlefield environment. Your mind is the battlefield, and the objective is to modify how you're thinking so that you will be aligned with, for instance, what the government wishes you to do. This is tech that was developed for offshore combat. It's military grade tech. And that is part of what underlies the, now we know that NATO was promoting all of this throughout the NATO alliance and then the Five Eyes Alliance intelligence community in UK, Canada, US, New Zealand, and Australia. So when you back in the day, you could see all this messaging was being coordinated globally. And back then I had the thesis, I kind of inadvertently open mic'd it on War Room with Bannon, that I thought that what was going on was the CIA was behind this, as opposed to Klaus Schwab or Tony Fauci or, all these various people that have been hypothesized to be the puppet masters. And now we know that, in fact, it was the intelligence, the U.S. intelligence community, the Five Eyes Alliance, and the NATO military structure that really promoted a lot of this within their spheres of influence. Now, the other thing you need to understand in this matrix, in which when this tech gets deployed against citizens, if you kind of process this is incredibly powerful tech. It is able to implant ideas in your mind. as I've outlined, through a variety of different mechanisms. So when the government decides to deploy this military-grade tech that was developed for offshore combat against the Taliban and other insurgencies largely, against their own citizens, then the idea of free agency and sovereignty and the social contract between the governed and the governing becomes completely obsolete, because then you have a caste. You could call it the deep state, you could call it the administrative state, you could call it the elite. You could, there's a lot of oligarchs, a lot of words we could throw around this, but whoever it is that's controlling this kind of messaging is able to manipulate the populace in a way that the populace really doesn't have free agency anymore and is not at liberty to really come up with their own thoughts. And furthermore, when the social media environment becomes so highly manipulated, it becomes very difficult to discern who is friend and who is foe, which, by the way, further drives us into social isolation. So you end up with this bizarre, surreal landscape where you cannot readily discern truth. The only way in the modern media ecosystem to discern truth is to try to triangulate, get multiple sources, and then kind of filter that against your own, let's call it soul, or your own, conscious and subconscious thought, that emergent feeling that you have that this is truth or this is fiction is kind of the only thing that you have left to discern what is reality. Now it gets worse. Okay. It gets worse.
I knew it.
It gets worse because this dovetails with the business model that made Silicon Valley profitable. Okay. And that business model is called surveillance capitalism. Once again, I didn't come up with the terminology. This is established terminology. Surveillance capitalism, you touch it and you become a little bit conscious of it. For instance, when you go on Amazon and you say, damn, I was just talking to my wife about that, and here it is, they're trying to sell it to me. That they're, especially if you have Alexa or, me with my bloody iWatch, God only knows how much they're capturing from that, more than my blood pressure or my heart rate, I guarantee. So, when you have these odd circumstances where you've been thinking about something or talking about something, and then it's suddenly being marketed to you inexplicably, that's coming out of this business called surveillance capitalism, in which you, to talk tech, your metadata are being aggressively captured and cataloged on a minute-by-minute basis. To illustrate the point, X, or Twitter, the old Twitter, but the new X, has a toggle switch in there that if you don't know it's there, it comes preset on. And if you don't know it's there, you don't know that you should turn it off. And when it's in the on setting, it provides permission for X to surveil any open tab in the browser in which you're using X. So they're not only searching and capturing and archiving what you're saying on X, they're also data mining whatever you've got going on Amazon or in your email, or God bless you if you're on OnlyFans. That's archived forever and will be used against you at some point. This is used, all this metadata is collected, and it's being used for two purposes. One is they're actually attempting to build avatars for people so that at some point in time you will be able to rent. I'm sure they're not going to sell it. They're going to rent to you because that's the business model. The ability to license various avatars. So we've talked previously about Dr. Ryan Cole, the notable pathologist based in your state, Idaho. And you would be able to get a virtual Ryan Cole that you could consult with, for example, based on all of the metadata that's been aggregated around Ryan Cole. But more than that, what they're doing with this metadata is they're building what are called behavioral futures. So this is like any kind of future, pork belly futures or anything else. They can sell behavioral futures are the predictions of what you as an individual will do and buy, what your politics are, what your emotions are, what you feel about the world. Those are all in your behavioral futures profile. And then behavioral futures are also parsed in a myriad of ways because you are seen as a representative of different group types. Josh belongs to the group of people that will do a podcast with a plaid flannel shirt. And so if somebody wants, if Land's End wants to sell plaid flannel shirts, they might want to know all about what Josh is and what makes him tick, just to, a little
right.
bit of a example. So that, here's the thing. All that data also gets sold to the government. It gets
Right.
sold to whoever wants to buy it. Okay, and the government doesn't have any restrictions on that because they're just buying it from a commercial source. So it only has the restrictions that come with a commercial source. And you've inadvertently allowed all these things to happen and capture, including the smart refrigerator that you went out and bought at Lowe's the other day. So this information then is an input vector. It is a source that gets fed into this PSYWAR propaganda, psychological manipulation, AI space machine that then gets fed back into your mind. So it really does get to the point, if you'll allow yourself to kind of take a moment, deep breath, process this, you get to the point where you can have no confidence that the thoughts that you're thinking are your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They haven't been put into you. And
They've been seeded.
That becomes deeply, deeply Orwellian. I think that the power of this tech is something that Huxley and Orwell could hardly even imagine. But that's where we're at. And of course, it's all accelerated by artificial intelligence. And to illustrate the point, to kind of give us a contemporary example, it's hard for me to imagine that what's going on in New Jersey and along the eastern seaboard with the drones is not a psyop.
Right.
It has all the hallmarks. And this also, now here's the other kind of leg on the stool. There's another tech here that is important for your listeners to understand. It was originally called information bioterrorism. I prefer to use the word psychological bioterrorism.
Mm-hmm.
This is the weaponization of existential fear to train and control populations. And we have all been subjected to this, and we're being subjected to it on a daily basis. We saw it not just with COVID. We've been trained like Pavlov's dogs to respond to a bell. We're responding to the bell that is, oh my God, there's a new infectious disease. And you can see the people that have really been captured by this training, because you'll see a narrative start to be injected into corporate media, and suddenly they're all wearing masks. They have a reflexive, trained response now. And that trained response includes compliance with authority figures, with messaging that's coming at you from a variety of sources, particularly public health in this case. But it's also the same approach of first seeding an idea and then gradually involve paying influencers, gradually expanding that distribution of that idea into the population until it becomes mainstream. It enters mainstream media. Many people think 4chan is being actively weaponized in this way to inject narratives into the population that then get expanded, and often are wrapped around things that will cause you to die, like, say, climate change. And then those things in one of the chapters, we go into this based on the interview that was provided in 2017, so before COVID, by a former Russian and, prior to the Russian Republic, Soviet KGB agent that was a specialist. He's a PhD, a specialist. Yuri Bezmenov, I think is his name. He was a
Yep.
specialist in biowarfare. And he gave an interview in New Zealand where he left and set up his practice as a consultant in 2017, in which he laid out standard military spycraft for how information bioterrorism or psychological bioterrorism is deployed for a variety of different purposes, commercial purposes, social disruption, all kinds of different agendas can be advanced using this approach, which is, by the way, much more effective and spreads much more rapidly and can cause orders of magnitude more financial damage than actual bioterrorism events. And what he emphasized was that once you get to the point where you have captured the audience and you deploy typically some magic solution, and you say, the crisis is now resolved because you are all wearing masks or distancing or taking the jab or whatever the thing is, this magic thing that has been injected that you've accepted in response to this terror campaign. He emphasizes that it's really important to keep that alive, that trained narrative. So avian influenza is a great example of this. We've had multiple rounds of fear around avian influenza that have never manifested as anything, but it's been kept alive.
Mhm.
And so if it's kept alive and there's population level, conscious or subconscious awareness of that as a threat, then it's really easy to reactivate it whenever you want, which seems to be what they're doing with avian influenza.
Yeah.
We have a
Hey,
total
Dr.
of
Malone,
60 cases of avian influenza in the United States.
Dr. Malone, you described a lot of stuff here that I can only imagine we would hope happens on both sides. Like if you want to say the bad guys are doing it, and then hopefully the good guys who gain a little bit of power can do it as well. If I can just simplify it real quickly, but when it comes to the folks who are just sitting here watching us chat and listening to your theories on all of this, is there going back to something you said earlier? Is there any nudge technology? Is there any urinal sticker we can put on that gets the folks who do have power from the federal, state, and local levels to not engage in this tyrannical behavior? Because otherwise we're just ebbing and flowing and giving whatever happens in the elections, all the power. I mean, what can we do?
Welcome
to
welcome to the modern PSYWAR battlefield. Incredibly good.
Well, are you our general? Well, give us some orders, General.
No, there's, and by the way, one of the key tenets in 5th generation warfare is you should never, the recipient of the attack should never be able to discern who is deploying it against them. Okay, so that's one of the key structures in this. It has to do with command and decentralization. So it's entirely aligned with the fundamental principles of 5th generation warfare, that you can't really tell who it is that's doing it to you. In terms of, is there a nudge technology that could be deployed to get local, state, and federal officials to not engage in this kind of stuff? If so, I don't know what the magic switch is. The only thing I know is that when people become informed, they become much more resistant to this kind of technology. Just like when we realize that they use, for instance, sex to sell us cars and hamburgers and dish soap, we become much more resistant to that, but it's still really powerful. I mean, the sex drive is just hardwired into our basal ganglion, into our brain stem, and it, even if we know about it, it's still really powerful, and can breach our conscious barriers. So I recommend, as I said, what you can do as an individual is do seek out multiple sources of information. Don't rely just on one source. Don't rely on Fox News. Don't rely on somebody that you respect that is on a podcast. Take what they're saying and compare it to other sources, and use your own discernment to try to detect what is truth and what is fiction. Of course, that's gotten a lot harder because we have entered into a kind of a post-truth world where by many, it's believed that your subjective feelings are the only indicator of what's true and not true, and what's true for you with your personal makeup and feelings isn't necessarily true for somebody else. So this is a subjective reality problem we have that underpins the gender fluidity and so many other social issues.
Big problem.
Yeah, the personal truth, my truth nonsense that's everywhere in the pop culture now.
Right. So triangulate truth, derived from the teaching of Matthias about the psychological basis of totalitarianism and mass formation. The condition that allows this mass formation process, this madness of crowds to occur, is driven by social isolation and social fragmentation, which is why I emphasize that the PSYWAR it's so insidious, because it makes that even worse. Humans have a fundamental need to connect with other humans. That's another thing that's hardwired into us. You could say the need for love or touch or connectedness to communities. And when we allow ourselves to be isolated, or isolation is forced on us, we become much more susceptible to a third party injecting themselves into our world and saying, so this is the authoritarian or totalitarian leader, and basically saying, I understand your pain. This is the subliminal messaging. I understand your pain, and I have a solution, but you just have to follow and listen to me. So Anthony Fauci provided a case study in the messaging that he gave about how that works. And he became the great hero. There was Tony Fauci underwear and cupcakes, everything else, if you recall. And the world went barking mad. And that was a great example of this madness of crowds phenomena, or mass formation. Mass formation seems kind of spooky. What it's talking about is the formation of crowds, or formation of masses that behave differently from individuals and normal communities that are interconnected organically. So if you want to become more resistant to this kind of phenomena, the starting point is to recommit yourself to your community, to your family, to your children, to your congregation, to structures that connect you to your local peers and colleagues. And
all the things that they tried to take away from us.
Right.
I mean,
that were taken away.
And so that must have just been a circumstance, right, Matt?
Right, yes.
No, that was the design.
Couldn't have been by design. No, that's conspiracy theory. Don't say that. I'm being facetious.
Oh, I know.
So that's my script. I don't know of a magic fly sticker that we can put on the forehead of a politician. The one that I think is closest to that is memes and humor.
Yeah.
Humor is an amazingly powerful counter PSYWAR tool, and it really can be used as a psychological warfare weapon. The other kind of derivative, Matt, of your thread, and I've written essays about this, sins of psychological warfare. I'll not name the colleagues that have, during this time that we've all been through, this kind of crucible, have taken the position, well, they're doing it to us, and so I'm going to do it to them. And, this is the it's a utilitarian argument. If it's working, the ends justify the means. So I ought to go ahead. If these are being effective, these methods, I should use them also, because I'm on the side of right and they're on the side of wrong. And the problem is that as soon as you do that, you end up becoming your opponent. It corrupts your soul. It makes you, these are dark forces that we're talking about. This sounds a little bit new age, but they are. I mean, we're talking about things that are fundamentally evil, fundamentally amoral, the manipulation of the human mind to enable you. And yet it's done all the time. You walk in to buy a used car. And what are they doing? well, it's kind of, their marketing, or is it PSYWAR? It's all in the same mix, right? So we're constantly exposed to it, but not in the, in a government-sponsored, weaponized a way that is harmonized across the nation and globally harmonized. That's what, and the power of the internet. So that's my prescriptions: is get out there, talk to people, even people that you dislike or you differ with. Encounter. Don't just have your head down when you're in the line at the grocery store. Talk to people.
Yes.
And socialize and build and reinforce local community. And I think that, plus triangulating truth, is your tools. And again, commit to family, community, and your personal social network as a way to immunize yourself against this tech. Because what happens is, if you're actually talking to people and you're observing something and you say, hey, Joe, did you notice blah, blah, blah? Did you notice this politician is saying this kind of BS and it's all spin? What do you think about that? And they say, yeah, I kind of felt, I kind of had this feeling it wasn't right. And you're right. I thanks for bringing that up. I think that's the best weapon we have against this kind of intentional falsehood that's been
more Socrates, less Fauci's.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Josh, do you have something else here?
Yeah, Dr. Malone. I guess it's a two-part question. I'll try to make it brief. I would love to know if you, this far away from the last 4 years, COVID, the craziness, I can't help but think like it looks less to me like a lab leak oopsie. It looks so well designed. It achieved the result of the 2020 election results. Do you think that was a large scale operation, or it was a partial accident that led to the operation that followed? And then once I get your answer for that, I'd love to ask, if that is at all true, the scale of these operations are so ridiculously large and blatant. So, 9/11 makes everyone want to sign up and go fight in the Middle East. But now COVID changes the whole dynamic of the world. But also, we don't even know why the heck there's drones over New Jersey, but we know it's in a full play PSYOP. So please, sir, love your answers on those.
About New Jersey, one of the things that's going on is there's a bill up for renewal
right,
that will further empower Department of Homeland Security to take action against drones.
But that seems so, and that could absolutely be the reason, I have no doubt. But what a glaring attempt. I mean, there's going to be a mass
the
hysteria.
thing is that the tech works. This approach works, and it kind of doesn't matter whether or not 20% of us are able to perceive the hidden hand,
right?
Because 20% of us don't swing an election, those of us that are in that 20% that now are so awake that we see bears in the woods everywhere that we turn, and maybe because there are bears in the woods everywhere we turn, it's hard to say. But what matters is the persuadable middle. Aldous Huxley made a case in the early 60s, right? The Brave New World author.
Mm-hmm.
And deep thinker about totalitarianism and this kind of propaganda stuff. He made an observation that has been repeated again and again in psychology, modern psychology, that about 20% of people are readily hypnotized and very susceptible to this kind of messaging and propaganda. 60% are intermediate kind of resistant, but they'll go whichever way the wind's blowing, and 20% are highly resistant to it. They're 20% of the population you cannot hypnotize for love or money. And these are the skeptics, and probably a lot of your audience are in that 20%. Aldous Huxley makes the case that this is absolutely necessary in order to govern, that you have to have a substantial minority that is very suggestible, because otherwise the government is unable to control the populace. We end up in anarcho-capitalism. And so it's argued that it's a good thing and absolutely necessary. The target for these psyops is not the 20% of skeptics, and it's not really the 20% of true believers. All you got to do is tell them that the government, Joe Biden says, go flush your toilet or don't use natural gas or whatever the thing is, and they'll all go do it. It's the 60%. And that persuadable middle is what moves elections and influences senators and everything else. And those folks generally aren't aware of how manipulated they are. They listen to CNN, well, less so than they used to, but you get the point. They tune in to Rachel Maddow, so that's that persuadable middle is where all the battle is over. Now, in terms of the thesis, that is until if and when at some point in time we have documents released, and some of those documents are coming to fore, like the Robert Koch Institute documents from Germany that demonstrate that Koch Institute was forced to buy into what were essentially political propaganda points during the COVID crisis that weren't scientifically based, but they didn't have any choice. At least that's their position. Of course, they did have a choice. They could have resigned, or they could have, gone to the press about it or whatever, but they wanted to preserve their job. So they had to go along with the politicians telling them that this was the messaging. And now we know that the politicians are saying, well, we weren't responsible for it. NATO told us we had to do this, is the way that's working. And you have Tedros Ghebreyesus at the WHO said, well, the WHO didn't mandate any of these things. They came from local governments. So everybody is busy trying to get plausible deniability about what happened right now, which is pretty clear indication that something went pretty haywire. Now, was it pre-canned? There's no question that now we have the documentation that, for instance, Ralph Barrick, who is never mentioned, was not, I don't think the name Barrick can be found with a search on the PDF of the select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic report. You'll read all about EcoHealth Alliance, but you're not going to read about University of North Carolina. But Barrick was absolutely involved in engineering this virus and transfer of the engineered virus to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So there clearly was an attempt to create a high pathogenicity coronavirus, a long-standing attempt, with multiple patents surrounding it and academic publications, et cetera, through gain-of-function research and through other texts like serial passage, kind of old school ways to manipulate viruses. So was it an intentional release in the beating industrial heart of Wuhan in the context of a growing trade war between the United States and China under Trump #1? Was it an inadvertent lab leak? Who was paying for this, and how did the reagents get there? Well, we know that the payment came from, among other places, Tony Fauci's NIAID, as well as the Defense Threat Reduction Agency Threat Mitigation Branch of the DoD. Provided substantial funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So and then we have Event 201 that was held literally concurrently with the supposed lab leak event that seemed to completely foreshadow everything, including the public policy decisions. And then we have the massive upwards transfer of wealth and the advocacy of agendas like universal vaccine passports and digital IDs that were insisted were necessary because of the COVID crisis, because it was 3.4% case fatality rate, which turns out to be more propaganda, and highly lethal that wasn't highly lethal. I think there's a mix of incompetence, and another essay that I wrote with a Venn diagram for Camelot. A mixture of malevolent intent, bureaucratic incompetence, and other kind of nefarious forces and emergent properties associated with very large, complex systems. In this particular Venn diagram, I structured those ideas around a central area where they overlapped, which I defined as the banality of evil, riffing off of the work and concepts of Hannah Arendt in her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, that evil often comes from very banal sources. People I'm just doing my job. I'm following what I have to do. What underpins a lot of this is, and underpins and enables the plausible deniability that is so widespread right now, is that there is a very aggressive pursuit of policy of siloing information, siloing decision-making, so that you end up with all these bureaucrats in their separate silos. They don't really know what's going on in the larger picture. They just know this is my job and I get this input and then I do this and then it goes to the next person. So that siloing of knowledge, information, process, intelligence, foreign policy has, I think, contributed to a significant extent here, but you absolutely can't roll out that there wasn't pre-planning and nefarious intent.
Yes. The book is PSYWAR, Dr. Robert Malone. We could spend another hour going through what you just set up again there, but let's throw that book up there. It's PSYWAR. It is available now. Dr. Malone, where can people find the book, and where can we follow the rest of your work for those who are may surprisingly be learning your name for the first time?
Thanks. So I'm supposed to say the book is available at all good booksellers. That's the official party line. It is available through Skyhorse directly, and if you wanted it at a discount, you can go to Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And I did personally record the audiobook if you're a fan of that format. If you want to listen to it while you're commuting to your 1,000-acre spread in Montana, or flying on your private jet, or just getting in your car, or doing the dishes. And it's also available on Kindle. So Skyhorse, whatever booksellers still exist that aren't Amazon and Amazon.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we can follow you on X. I think we just had it up.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's all so the way we really make our living. You don't make it hardly anything off of books. Books are basically just a credibility sticker. I got a book out. But our revenue, what allows us to feed the horses and put gas in the car and diesel in the truck is Substack. And because X shadow bans anything that has the word Substack on it, we've had to rebrand to Malone.news. So you can find our Substack at Malone.news, and on X and Gab and Getter and True Social, it's at RW Malone MD. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Josh. Any final words from you?
No, Dr. Malone, it's a pleasure to speak with you. We hope to have you back. Thank you.
Look forward to it, and give them hell, right?
That's right, sir.
Give them hell.
That's right. All right, everybody. Well, that does it for us today. We got a lot of good bonus show time on this episode. Josh, should we quickly rail through the?
Well, that was awesome. I hope everybody liked that. Dr. Malone, I could just, I've listened to almost everything he's done. I'm going through his book now. It's fantastic. I really recommend it because. I think that we didn't talk about it here, but I think there's a generational sensitivity to some of these things too. I see that younger people they're a little more used to, not trusting the news. The older generation, that was the authority. They didn't have anything else. Now, and I actually, a lot of times I think I don't want to criticize the older generation for that, because we sit in this comfortable spot where we have, so many sources of information. And so the news looks silly to us half the time, the network news. I think that I've been pondering this a lot. We'll come back to it in another episode, but like imagine a generation, Matt, where you sat quietly in a dark room and ingested a narrative, a really well-crafted narrative, and you didn't talk, right? You're not supposed to talk.
Yeah.
And it like pinged your emotions. This is why we're into filmmaking. This is how you and I are filmmakers. I never thought, like, my parents' generation, that's all they only knew, that sit quietly, ingest subconsciously this messaging. Now that's kind of being broken. Now we get it in micro doses that kind of destroy our brain and and our dopamine system. Yeah, that's a big long rant. Anyways, go to our X, guys, and you'll see everything there.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
Yes,
absolutely.
Go to the X, everybody. Okay, Rumble too, because I'm sure YouTube loves Dr. Malone. There's no way they would want to censor or block anything we talked about today.
Not at all. And honestly, like, if it wasn't for places like Rumble and now X with Elon, I got to say this to Dr. Malone before we went on the air, but personally, my family and good close people that we know are so grateful for folks like Malone who stepped out and put their lives on the risk. I mean, I'm sure at risk by being a voice for truth and helping navigate us during a really tumultuous time during 2020 and 2021, especially when the vaccines hit out there. We didn't even really get into that, but his whole background about how he's the one that was part of the inventing team of the mRNA platform. So it's fascinating, and I'm so grateful that we had Dr. Malone on here. So very good. All right, Josh. Well, we'll be back here on the Friday show. Thanks so much for everybody. We'll see you next time. God bless.
Thanks, everybody.